Okay, hello. I'm George, and I'm going to be giving the second webinar of our 4-webinar series. And the title of this one is Should You Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is? As we're going to be thinking about the types of voice biometric technology that your bank may or may not be encouraging you to use. But before we get onto that, I have some other bits and pieces I want to talk about. So I'm going to briefly talk about who I am and what I'm interested in, and that naturally feeds into what I will be teaching on our new MSc in Forensic Linguistics and Speech Science. And we are affectionately calling that MSc in Forensic Linguistics and Speech Science, FLiSS. I think throughout I will be talking about why you might want to study this degree and why you might want to do it here at Lancaster and why now might be a good time, but I will also make an effort to talk about that as well. And then I will give our FLiSS super mini lecture about voice biometric technology, just to give you a taste of the sorts of things you might learn on the MSc. And then if you like that, I will give you details of what you might want to return to, i.e. episode 3 of our 4 webinar series, and then give you the details you will need should you have any questions for us, be it about the content of our mini lectures, but also any questions you might have about the MSc or studying with us in general. So, cracking on, who am I? So I've already told you I'm George, and I'm a lecturer in Forensic Linguistics here in the Department of Linguistics and English Language at Lancaster University. My research interests recently have been around these 3 things. So I'm mostly interested in forensic speech technology. So how can we bring speech technologies, so technologies like automatic speech recognition technologies and automatic speaker recognition technologies, so technologies that aim to recognize the individual speaking, or technologies aiming to recognize what is being said. Can we use any aspect of these technologies for forensic applications? So could they be used for forensic casework when perhaps speech data has arisen as evidence in a legal case? Or could we use these technologies in intelligence and security contexts? So perhaps in surveillance contexts where data or speech data is coming in all the time. Can we use these speech technologies to help us process that sort of data? So that's forensic speech technology and my general interest in that. I'm also interested in speaker identification more broadly. So, of course, we can use speech technology to help us identify speakers, and that's what this super mini lecture is about today. But also I'm interested in the human expert processes of performing speaker identification tasks. And then I'm also interested in the general idea of improving practice in forensic speech science. So how can we better ourselves as speech analysts in forensic and intelligence contexts? How can we train our future forensic speech scientists in the most effective ways possible? How can we test our future forensic speech scientists in a meaningful way? And also the general landscape of forensic speech science and the politics of carrying out this kind of work are also areas of interest for me. So I generally carry out research and talk about these things. And these feed nicely into what I would teach on the upcoming MSc in Forensic Linguistics and Speech Science. So you can expect to hear more about the sorts of things I've just discussed. I might slice and dice topics in slightly different ways, but generally you can expect to learn about forensic voice comparison. So this is the task of taking a recording of an unknown speaker, something like a fraudulent telephone call, and carrying out an analysis on that, on the speech of that unknown caller, and also analysing the speech of a suspect, perhaps captured in an interview context, and arriving at a conclusion that gives us an indication of how likely it is we've got the same speaker in those recordings or different speakers in those recordings. So that's voice comparison, and that is a big part of forensic speech science. There's also forensic transcription, which is a smaller part of forensic speech science traditionally, but it is a significant task type. So this is when we're interested in the content of a speech recording, like what was said. So we might have an audio recording from a case, perhaps it's some grubby CCTV footage, and it's of interest to us what was said by the speakers in that captured in that CCTV footage. It's rubbish quality, and so we might be asked to carry out an analysis to determine or give an indication of what was said, or perhaps suggest that we can't get a reliable transcription from that recording. Voice analytics I've put in here. Voice analytics is not traditionally a part of forensic speech science, and it's not traditionally a term used by the academic sphere or the more academic sphere in forensic speech science. It's more a term that's come out of the intelligence and security communities within forensic speech science, and it's about what information can we draw from voice data. Can we draw information about the speakers? Can we draw information about the event in which they're speaking? Any information we can capture from voice data that might help intelligence and security contexts in particular. So we would talk about that as well. And then, of course, we would want to consider, because we can't get away from it, the types of technology that is available for these different types of tasks and their prospects for helping us for these types of tasks. What the best ways of using this technology, what aren't they so good at? So within forensic speech science, I would talk about what these different technologies have to offer us if we're carrying out speech analysis in these forensic or investigative contexts. Okay. So to talk about the sorts of cases that we could apply this sort of forensic speech science knowledge to, Claire gave a very good case example in her webinar that precedes this one, so webinar 1. So Claire talked about a case scenario where perhaps we've got high international fraud. An agency have run a covert surveillance operation on the person of interest's vehicle, so bugged it with microphones and captured some audio that might have valuable information and in that audio. But as is the way with this type of audio, it's poor quality. You've got the engine noise, indicators, music's playing, you've got multiple speakers involved, and it's just usually very, very bad quality. And from this recording, the person of interest disputes that they weren't talking about fraud. They were actually talking about cheese, and they are actually disputing that it wasn't even them talking in that recording. It was somebody else. So you've got these cases where perhaps you've got all of this recording that contains this helpful information, but it's being disputed by the accused. So in this example, we have a place for forensic linguistics that perhaps looks at, whether the individual was actually talking about cheese, or was that actually some sort of code for fraud, and disputing the identity of the speaker. Now, taking the forensic speech science side, I just want to take this case a little bit further down the line to give you a sense of the sorts of things we would talk about or think about the best ways of going about it. So the person of interest is charged and prosecuted for this crime. And to help build their case, the prosecution asks a forensic speech scientist to analyse the recordings captured in this operation and compare them with a recording of the suspect, of the person of interest, to perform that forensic voice comparison task to arrive at a conclusion that might assist their case. So in this case, the prosecution expert reaches a weak support for the view that it is the same speaker. Now, that person of interest obviously has a defence solicitor, and that defence solicitor approaches you as an independent forensic speech scientist. You carry out your own analysis and actually arrive at a conclusion that supports the other view, the view that there are different speakers in these recordings, and actually that view assists the defence case. So what happens then? And we could talk about what happens then, and we would, especially in the context of forensic speech science, on our MSc in forensic linguistics and speech science. So you could be asked to, or invited to, engage with the other expert witness in an expert witness meeting and review your findings. You might simply be asked to stand in the witness box as an expert witness and represent your analysis and your report. So there are things later on down the line that we're interested in and think about the best ways in which we can present our evidence and the most responsible ways in which we present our evidence in these sorts of cases that might arise where there is conflict in the conclusions that independent experts reach. So that was me building on Claire's case that she introduced last week, in the last webinar. Just to give you more of a sense, more of a taste of the sorts of things that we think about and that we will talk about on our masters. Why Lancaster? Again, in webinar 1, Claire gave some very good reasons about the Lancaster context and why we are quite a good place and in a good position to be delivering this masters in forensic linguistics and speech science. Just focusing very briefly on the Department of Linguistics and English Language at Lancaster. We are very big as a department. We have lots of areas of expertise. We have all sorts of equipment. The psycholinguists have their labs and facilities and things. And there is lots going on in terms of research groups, discourse analysts, the lot. Just homing in on the particular features that perhaps are of particular interest to students of forensic linguistics and speech science, we have a very well-equipped phonetics lab that has hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of equipment that allow high-quality phonetics and speech science research, first of all. So on the speech side. On the linguistics side, we are home to the ESRC Centre for Corpus Approaches to Social Science, so CAS. What does that mean? So this is a huge centre for corpus linguistics. It's world renowned. It's world famous. And what does this mean? We have all sorts of corpus linguistics expertise here at Lancaster, but we also have corpus resources. So we have corpora housed here that we can use. We have the tools that have been developed in-house to analyse corpora here in-house, and having the conversations with the developers and the creators of these puts us in a very good place for people to become experts in forensic linguistics. And finally, more sort of recent news. So those top two bullet points are old news. But more recent news is that we have recently been awarded over £200,000 to develop an operations suite. So this is specifically for forensic linguistics and speech science. And we plan to use the funding to put together some infrastructure that would allow us to simulate covert surveillance operations where we would draw in and capture all sorts of language data that is typically captured in surveillance operations. And so we can start to become experts in analysing that data and developing better ways of working with that data and analysing that data for investigative purposes. So that is what we've called the preamble. I will now move on to the mini lecture. So, should you put your money where your mouth is? We're thinking about voice biometric technology in banking. So you may have an online banking account. You may use your phone and access your online banking account through an app on your phone. I think many of us have been invited to use the voice biometric feature. So we get in a position where we can simply say, my voice is my password, and that is part of the access mechanism to access our online account. So in this lecture, I'm going to be reviewing the related literature to help you decide whether you should actually be accepting that invitation from your bank to use the voice biometric feature on the app. So voice biometric technology is actually quite a commercial term that isn't used by the academic community. It's a form of automatic speaker recognition, and automatic speaker recognition is the term that you will find in the academic literature most of the time. So an automatic speaker recognition works like this. So you take your one speech sample, so speech signal A, you take the other speech sample, speech signal B, you pump it through a piece of AI that builds a model that aims to express the speaker-specific features of those speech signals, and then you compare those models to arrive at a likelihood of, indicating whether we've got the same speakers in both those recordings or different speakers in those recordings. That is the general gist. So in your voice biometric technology offered by your bank, speech signal A is you talking into your phone, and speech signal B is perhaps the recordings that you have already submitted to it to train that piece of technology up on your voice, because it'll ask you to do some pre-submissions saying my voice is my password 20 times, I don't know, to build a model of you. So this technology will just compare those samples of you to hopefully arrive at a same speaker conclusion, but it might not work, of course. Well, we'll see. We'll see what I say. We'll see what I say. Okay, so that's automatic speaker recognition. Now, I dare say that in the commercial world, the banks themselves have either carried out research themselves on this voice biometric technology that they would have had to, or engaged with other people to help them with that research. I don't doubt that for a second. But I do want to point out that there is very little of the research on specifically my voice as my password technology out there in the open. So I can only call on really the good automatic speaker recognition work that exists out there in the open, and that's what I'm going to be calling on here. So to an extent, we're going to have to speculate, but there's a lot of value we can draw in doing that. So that is one little caveat before I get going. Now, in the automatic speaker recognition literature, we are seeing some impressive performances. So we do see instances or studies that report 0% error rate. So getting it right, getting the same speaker or different speaker conclusion right every single time. And I believe that. I know that is true. And I believe those studies. There's no reason to not believe those studies. Those studies tend to be done on data that is well behaved, where you have lots of data, reasonable quality data to represent your speaker, like the speech sample A, speech signal A and speech signal B, lots and lots of data. What the system is trained on tends to be well matched and to the speech signals going in. And the conditions are generally good, and you tend to get your systems performing very, very well on those data sets with state-of-the-art automatic speaker recognition technology. You see other literature, of course, where there are errors emerging, and that is where we tend to have systems that are using less well-matched data as training data, or data that is more challenging in some ways, poorer quality, and then you'll start to see the cracks. And it is typical to see studies reporting 10 to 20% false acceptance rates. So that's where the system is taking a pair of recordings that are in truth different speakers and actually falsely concluding that they are the same speaker. Likewise, vice versa, false rejection rates, where you've got in truth the same speaker as speech signal A and speech signal B going through that system, and then actually falsely the system concludes that you've got different speakers. And you can, as you sort of read the literature and become good at it, you actually can almost predict the kinds of results that an automatic speaker recognition system will pump out based on the quality of the data, the duration of the data, the type of the data, and it's also well known that or recognized that the individual speaker, some speakers will be particularly recognizable or not. So different speakers will have different performances as well. So variable. The automatic speaker recognition literature is variable. It's data dependent, of course, but the point is it's not watertight. It's not getting it right every single time. Under great conditions, yes, but when we're actually using these things in an application, we don't get great conditions. Generally, though, the research is largely carried out on longish stretches of spontaneous speech. So the system, these technologies that are often being tested, they have an opportunity to create a good comprehensive model of the speaker because it's presented with longish, so maybe a minute's worth of speech per speaker. And there's something that I'm keen to communicate, because in that research that is typically done on, well, there are lots of standard data sets that are typically used for automatic speaker recognition research, which is fine. It allows people to test their systems on thousands and thousands of data samples, so they can report these percentages or these performances based on thousands of trials, thousands of pairs of recordings. But when you open up those data sets that people are testing their systems on, you soon learn that these trials that are contributing to these performances are really easy. So I went into one of these data sets because I carry out work on these data sets, and I took the first trial that was listed in the tests. And here is a snippet of speech signal A and speech signal B in that trial. So here's speech signal A. Okay, that's one. So you've got two speakers there. One is female, one is male. You've got different accents, and that's a really easy trial. And that's the first one I opened. And well, that's the first one listed in this test that lots and lots of people have carried out on their automatic speaker recognition systems. So these easy trials are contributing to the performances that are reported in the academic literature on automatic speaker recognition technology. So we want to keep that in mind. And while it's impressive that we can build technology that can do this task, we still need to keep in mind that a lot of these trials, many of these trials, are actually really easy. Now, another point is that much of the research literature on automatic speaker recognition technology is carried out on samples longer than 10 seconds. So in these standard data sets that automatic speaker recognition researchers use for their research and their testing, there are different conditions. And so there's the long speech sample condition, which tends to be about 60 seconds. And then there's the short speech sample condition, which tends to be 10 seconds. And actually, you can fit quite a lot of speech into 10 seconds. But if we compare that 10-second short condition, that has had a lot of research carried out on it and tends to get bigger error rates naturally. Keep that 10 seconds in mind. I recorded myself saying my voice is my password for you. My voice is my password. My voice is my password. And when I open it up on Praat, so this is the tool we use to visualize and analyze speech, and you would use if you were coming to study the MSc in forensic linguistics and speech science, that's only 2 seconds of speech. And I do question if that is enough to capture my voice. Now, of course, in the my voice is my password type technology, it is well controlled and very cooperative, unlike automatic speaker recognition academic research. But it is just something to bear in mind. I think we do need to question the duration of the sample in this type of technology, because it's not well researched in the academic literature. That's the technology, and a word or a few words on the state of the technology literature. I think we just need to look at voice data on its own, independently of the technology for a second, and ask the question, is voice even a biometric though? We should remember that voice biometric technology is a commercial term. We don't tend to use it in the academic world. And actually, strictly speaking, voice isn't a biometric. And use of the term voice biometric technology could actually be overstating the power of voice for this purpose. So if we take the definition of biometric data from the GDPR, which is biometric data are personal data resulting from specific technical processing relating to the physical, physiological, or behavioral characteristics of a natural person, which allow or confirm the unique identification of that natural person. Now, voice researchers will be able to tell you that we cannot uniquely identify individuals through their voice. We would never reach a strength of conclusion that is of the same strength of a good sample of DNA. You can't do it with voice. People share features with other speakers, and there's a lot of overlap when it comes to voice data. So voice, while it can give us some indication of an individual, it can't uniquely identify someone. It can't identify someone to the exclusion of all others. We know that as voice researchers. So we should bear in mind that voice isn't a biometric, it's strictly speaking. So a word on that. And then to add insult to injury, we have the rise of AI generated speech. Now it's in the media, and it's quite well known now that AI generated speech can be hard to detect. So I want you to say to yourselves which of these you think are AI generated out of 1, 2, and 3. So here's one.
It was up to whoever wanted a vote to get it organized.
Here's 2.
It's always the same, isn't it?
And here's 3.
She has recently become a regular member of the Scottish Opera Company.
Which of those are AI generated speech samples? The answer is all of them. There are a few little cues in those, and if that was a struggle, that is a struggle. These are quite hard samples in that they're very short. They're based on read speech, and lots of people get this wrong. So we know that they are hard to detect as AI generated speech. But the tricky thing in the context of voice biometric technology is the fact that AI generated speech is not only now difficult to detect, but it is now actually pretty good at modeling the speech and reproducing the speech of a specific speaker. So I've got 2 speakers here, and I've got the genuine speech samples produced by them as humans, and then I've got the AI generated equivalents that have created speech based on that speaker. So here are some genuine human speech samples given to us or provided by speaker 1.
They believed it worked. They have shown a great desire and attitude. The shareholders will vote to wind up the company on Friday morning.
So they're genuine speech samples from speaker 1. Here is the AI reproduction of speaker 1.
There was even the original picture of the first team on display. I love the thought of having a crack at defending the title. The government in Westminster is simply not prepared to save him.
That's speaker 1. And you could say, okay, it might have been really good for that speaker, but it's not necessarily good for all speakers. And that's a genuine research question. But here's just another taste of speaker 2, different speaker, different features. I've picked one that has different features so you can sort of get a taste. So here's genuine human samples from speaker 2.
The other conditions were not specified. Agents and coaches must be paid.
I can't access the third one, but you get the idea of the speaker 2. And then here's the AI generated version of speaker 2.
David was not disappointed, but was also pleased from a day. He made no big mistakes. As well as Agassi and the 2 British players, the Croatian is among the few players loved by the Wimbledon crowd.
And hopefully you agree that these AI reproductions of speaker 1 and speaker 2 are pretty good reproductions of speaker 1 and speaker 2. And it's this new capability of AI generated speech, i.e. closely resembling the original speaker, a target speaker, that presents some issues for voice biometric technology. And these types of samples are difficult for automatic speaker recognition technology to cope with. And there is research happening that's looking at making our automatic speaker recognition technology more robust to these sorts of technologies. We don't necessarily have a good solution yet, but research is underway. That's the state of where we're at with that. So the question is, should you put your money where your mouth is and be using voice biometric technology that your bank is inviting you to use? I've said my piece on it. I will let you answer that based on what I've been talking about in this super mini lecture. So that is the super mini lecture for episode 2 of this 4 webinar series. We would love to see you at the next episode of this webinar mini series, where Izzy Clark will be talking about forensic authorship analysis. So this is a core piece of work carried out by forensic linguists. And she will be talking about how it was applied to a recent terrorist case. So please do tune in for episode 3, which will take place on the 27th of March at 2 p.m. Like I said, Izzy Clark will be delivering that one, and Claire Hardacre will be there as well, hanging around in the chat. And if you have any questions on any of the content of this webinar, please do feel free to get in touch with us. There's some email addresses at the end there. And thank you very much for listening.